Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings be upon you. In the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful. All glory and praise belongs to God, and salutating with salutations to the beloved and all the beloveds of God, who include Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his holy family. Thank you so much for tuning into our fourth Divine Clinic Foundation podcast series called Healing is Believing. And our subject today is purification. I'm your host, QW. Joining me is my co-host, the delightful Imam Saab. Assalamu alaikum, Imam Saab. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. QW, how are you? Alhamdulillah, thank you for having us, inshallah.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah, always a pleasure to have you. So to get started, we understand everybody is seeking peace. And in our past episodes, we discussed upon the importance of peace and effects of negative energy. In this discussion, we will be exploring purification of the self. There are levels of purification. And when I reflect on the term purification, it's quite vast. But to break it down, when we look within ourselves, I see it as one that is honest, sincere, and transparent in life in everything we do, because when we live by those inner values, there is a sense of inner peace within oneself, as the conscious is aligned with your true self, because you feel light and ease, and knowing that you've not done any injustice to anyone when you put your head down at night. And surely the heart is our core existence, and it's important to nurture it and keep it real through our daily practices, from mindful meditation, prayers, intermittent fasting, alongside in giving. On a healing perspective, Imam Saab, please kindly explain to our audience your take on this subject matter.
Right, okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, I mean, looking at the perspective of purification, from the perspective of my own teacher and their teachings, is that purification is a process that is a very complex one, especially when you're in the path of Islam. In the path of Islam, that you understand that there are 7 levels of consciousness, as there are 7 heavens, and each level has within it an infinite number of levels of consciousness within itself. And that in itself is the true testament of the infiniteness of God Himself, the limitless attribute of God Almighty. And what we're seeing here, really, in terms of purification, of one trying to purify themselves, we are talking from a cellular level. We have to talk from the exoteric perspective first, because it's the exoteric, the physical form of worship through religion, the rituals of religion, which are preparing you and preparing oneself for the spiritual undertaking on seeking the path of enlightenment, as it were, of the deeper mystical spiritual sciences of Islam or any other type of religion out there at the moment. Now, from what we understand in terms of what we're doing and how we're helping others, especially those who are within our communities who have, faced, all sorts of turmoil through going through all these different avenues and being turned down or turned away at every door, and then having to ultimately come to the door of Allah, and then trying to understand themselves again. We then take them from that place of darkness, and we instill them on a sort of recovery plan, as it were, in which we get involved, the association and our spiritual teacher as well. We get involved in cleansing that individual, that household, or that family. The process itself is a very delicate process, because, again, any time that you're dealing with someone's spiritual energy or spirit itself, it's a very, very sacred thing. And it's not something that should be undertaken without, without understanding, without responsibility and accountability as well. because what we understand is obviously, there has to be all of these a fulfillment of criteria um, for the permissions of the higher levels of consciousness that come to that individual. So when we're talking about purification, from the perspective of the individual, for someone who is seeking nearness to God, who's seeking nearness to the truth, or seeking nearness to a sense of peace. Or where do they go? What do they do? Well, the purification steps that they're taking are not really the steps of purification at all, but they are the standardized sort of protocols in sort of aligning their own characteristics to that of their higher self. So, for example, anyone on the path of what you would say purification or enlightenment, you would say that they would go through this path of character building, yeah, where they would, where this, the actual um, value of morality within that human being is is sort of like it's heightened morality, ethics, love, towards one another, and upholding justice as well. So therefore, this kind of element of truthfulness and abstaining from what is false. So, what can cause harm, what can cause harm to the individual, you'll stay away from. So then, what you're going through is a process in which you're taking the steps of, again, trying to reach a state of purification. But truly, purification can only come from when you have gone through the process of being cleansed first, you see? Because unless you're cleansed, your spirit will always remain in a kind of a negative, imbalanced state. And that is not through fault of the individual, but it's a it's through the evolvement of negative energy from their environment. Whereas something before 1400 years, 1300 years, 1000 years ago, 500 years ago, 50 years ago, in fact, the environment that was around us was, again, more similar to sort of background radiation. That's how negative energy was back then. But now what we're seeing through the adaptation and the evolvement of sin within people's lives, the recklessness of ignorance as well, the loss of morality within the human being, the loss of humanity within a community. And what we're seeing is now that this background radiation has now become radioactive and has become very, very toxic. And this is affecting people, and it will also affect you if you're trying to reach a higher state of consciousness. Because why? Because now you have got additional barriers as well to overcome. So I think when you're talking about purification, I think you can look at purification of the heart, purification of oneself, of their attributes, qualities. But true purification can only come through one who themselves has been purified by the hands of a spiritual master, you know. So one who has attained the rank of nearness to God Almighty, which we understand from Islam is the awliya of the saints of God, the friends of God. Um, and when you look at their depiction of their lives, it's always in sacrifice or servitude to humanity. Um, and these are the sort of the basic tenets of these great legends, that have remained both visible from the past and hidden from the present.
So it's interesting because we're talking about reviving the classical teachings when we talk about our teacher, the Olia of our time. And true purification comes as they are not operating from the system of this world, meaning they have a lot of they've seek that level of perfection of the inner self,
Of course,
and
yeah.
and are able to help humanity with all the negativity, and it's hard for an individual to stay in a purified state. They may be raised in a household with good character, conduct, reverence to God, prayers, fasting, but the negativity around them, or actually may not be in the house, but it could be the external, which prevents them from getting to that heightened level of the seventh layer of consciousness, correct?
Yes, when I say seventh layer of consciousness, obviously that's not something that you want to aim towards right at the beginning. Again, whenever you're looking to do any type of spiritual practice, you must, and I stress this with great importance, because from the realm of how we're assisting people who have been spiritually aggrieved and distressed for almost decades, in some cases, what we would say is that spiritual practice is something that one should not perform by themselves, and it's not something that one should be taken lightly as well. It's not something where you'd read a book and say, well, yeah, I'm going to try this out myself. Because again, once you start going through the veils, there's a lot of darkness within the veils. And if you don't know what you're doing and what you're dealing with, it will become a very, very scary journey. And it will inevitably, without the protection of a spiritual guide, you're opening yourself up to inflict more darkness onto yourself, and that will inhibit your path, to self purify, as it were, or purification. But I think, we're using the term purification, but I think we have to understand that there is another aspect before purification even comes in, and that's the cleansing. That you have to go through a period of cleansing, and even cleansing yourself of your lower desires, of your lower self, through acts of selflessness towards others, towards humanity, towards humanity at large, but your family, the people you're around, your community. These are all people that are around you that obviously would play a pivotal role in your development, in your respective development, under the hands of a teacher. So it's very important that you pick your teachers wisely, and that you understand that those, and it's often that your heart will tell you, the heart will never lie to you, in terms of understanding the concepts that you cannot see with your own vision, with your own, through this world of conjecture, are hidden from you. So I think when we're talking about purification to become purified, I think, as the most purest one to have ever walked this earth, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam once said, is that to become pure is to become responsible. And to become pure is to accept a great deal of responsibility, because there's a long way before one can undertake that amount of responsibility, you see, by themselves anyway.
Yes,
And
absolutely. There's so
you
so
see,
much distraction today to maintain that responsibility in our households, in our day to day, because
yes,
we come back. It comes down to the fundamentals of ethics,
yes,
and it's interesting. You also mentioned how people take spirituality in their own hands, um, thinking that they can solve matters, but this is something not to mess with. And when you're dealing with negativity, we do know there is the concept of to kind of simplify your life, or live a modest life, because when you are on the external, egoistic, showing your showing what you may have, or it could be other people's intentions that come onto you that causes negativity and that affects the being. And there are teachers out there or individuals out there that help beings and saying, oh, we can help remove that negativity off you because we understand where it's coming from. You've been, say, in a public space and you've been in a large gathering. And so we help you, but failing to realize when they're taking that negativity out and if they're not purified themselves fully, it's only going to come back, if not harm them, but harm the people in their household.
Yeah, so we have seen that, and I mean, from our perspective, from what we deal with, and if there are other healers out there listening as well from different walks of life and different backgrounds, I implore you, that we can have an open discussion with regards to practices that yourselves do, and talk from a sort of a level platform. Because I mean, the things that we are dealing with, we are talking about severe darkness, is what we're dealing with. I don't think a lot of even other sort of spiritual mediums and energy practitioners and the likes, they deal with even 5% of the heaviness of what we have to deal with through our association. And I think it's important to understand the reality of how dark is dark, you see. I mean, the whole concept in today's kind of society is about reaching enlightenment, this kind of illusionary kind of tale of just, wandering off and sort of becoming all starry eyed, you know. But the reality is that there's still darkness around you and darkness within you. And you have to understand the steps of cleansing the inner through the outer and cleansing the outer through the inner. And once that you have understood the effects of, understanding that you are part of a greater fabric of existence, and that when you become um, a being of consciousness. Now, we said that there are 7 levels of consciousness, but within each level of consciousness, there are an infinite number of levels. So, how does one know which level they're on? And that's a good question, because I think that can be very, very simplified, answered in a very simplified manner by understanding a very famous saying by the Sultan of the Awliya, that is the king of the saints. Is most notable in the Islamic world as Abdul Qadir Jilani, Mahbubi Rabbani alayhi salam, in which they said, in one of their works, they said that the man who knows the spiritual stations of others knows the spiritual station of himself. I think that's a very profound thing, because if you have that spiritual truth within you, and that you have reached this nearness to God, which you know within yourself is not like anything else, that you are able to see the truth manifested in every single person that you see, or every other spiritual person that you come across, you see. But they may not understand the way you are seeing it. I think it's a very profound thing, because it's not something you can explain. It's something that you have to witness yourself. That comment, I think, stands true and will stand the test of time, really, because I think we're now at the stage where everybody has kind of made themselves important, within their own communities, within their own subgroups, within their own respective healing associations, as they are, their networks, whatever it is. Everybody has kind of crawled back into this kind of reclusive mode. And I think it's important that we, invite kind of sincere discussion amongst other people who are interested in helping humanity at large, in discussing the effects and severity of negative energy, how it can affect, and how seriously it can impinge, even on your own self in developing spiritually further as well.
Yes, I believe so. I'm so grateful that we have this platform that we can discuss and share and in the future bring other healers as well. And the big concern is people taking matters in their own hand
Of course. Oh
and
my goodness, yes.
affecting other innocent lives too, unknowingly. And it's something, energy is not something to mess with, because there
No.
is the negative and dark side that you just mentioned.
Mm.
And on a daily basis, we're getting everything, our whole surroundings are just surrounded by negativity. And we are in
Mm.
a time where the services of the cleanse is so important in
Mm.
kind of balancing, as we mentioned before, within the self, so that the heart can be in a purified state and work at
Yes.
optimal function.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm really grateful for your time, Imam Saab, today to enlighten us on purification of
Alhamdulillah.
esoteric teachings and seeking nearness to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And we look forward to our audience joining us again next week. And thank you also today for listening to our podcast. Assalamu alaikum.